This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. There are two phases to training camp. There's the first 3 weeks where everybody's practicing and you get pads on for the first time and you're just getting to watch that. And then there is the preseason portion of training camp where the focus is less on the practices because now most practices aren't open to the public and now squarely on what's happening in these preseason games. It takes on a life of its own. And to celebrate going from that phase of preseason, of training camp practice to the preseason, I want to talk about players who have stood out in a positive way during the training camp portion of the off season. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about training camp standouts. We have a lot to talk about here, so that's the good news. But before I get into that, I got to thank my sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 sports pick app. The app is really easy to use for player picks. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. That's it. Rather just pick teams, PrizePicks has that now too. Just pick the winner, spread, or total in any game or fight. PrizePicks is available in most states, including California, Texas, and Florida. Plus, you can even follow me on the app at Quen_C. Tell my picks, one click, and follow your friends too. Best of all, play your first $5 and get $150 in lineups if you win. Just use the promo code HMA when you sign up. That's right. PrizePicks just switched up their offer, so there's no better time to join. Lock in and win with that first lineup. That's code HMA at sign up to get $150 in bonus lineups if you win with your first $5 or up lineup. All right, so the first one, and I think the most obvious one, is Denzel Boston, Casey Concepcion, and Isaiah Bond. These guys have been great, really good. I've really enjoyed what these guys have done. So let's talk about them individually. And I want to talk about them in Denzel Boston's going to go last because I think we've talked a ton about Denzel Boston, but I think the other two have gone a little underappreciated, especially Isaiah Bond, right? Because Isaiah Bond is in this weird spot where he's not a high draft pick. He's technically a undrafted free agent. The Browns gave him a good amount of money for a UDFA, but still a UDFA because of everything he had going on. And because he's not a high draft pick, people kind of look at him as whatever we get from him is extra. And I think that's fair, but also Isaiah Bond has been impressive in all the phases of the offseason, right? During OTAs and minicamp, I was excited to see Isaiah Bond was getting open a lot, but I was also pump the brakes because a guy with Isaiah Bond's skill set tends to stand out when the Browns are in shorts and t-shirts, right? Training camp tends to separate that. There's been guys every year who look good in shorts and t-shirt because they're really fast. So I was like, okay, I've seen that template of a player look good in this setting before, so let me be cautious of it. Then we get to training camp. He talks about all the muscle he's gained, and you can tell when you look at him. And then you watch him in training camp, pads on, no pads on, shells on, no shells on. He's physical, he's getting open, and he's making contested catches. I don't know where Isaiah Bond is going to end up in the rotation because ultimately Jerry Jeudy's going to get more targets than him. Casey Concepcion is going to get more targets than him, and Denzel Boston and Harold Fannin are going to get more targets than him, right? That's already 4 people on the totem pole, and then we get to Isaiah Bond. But if Isaiah Bond is our 5th guy on the totem pole and he looks as good as he's been looking, we might have something actually solid here. Say what you want about Jerry Jeudy, but let's say Jerry Jeudy's 3rd in targets this year, right? Behind Denzel Boston, who would be #1. From what we've seen in camp, Harold Fannin, who probably be #2 because he plays tight end, and then #3 would be Jerry Jeudy. As much as people don't like Jerry Jeudy, If Jerry Jeudy's getting your third most targets on your team, that's pretty good. Or fourth most targets on your team, because Casey Concepcion might get more targets than him. And then Isaiah Bond is your guy getting the fifth most targets. That's a really good place to be in. When I talk about this all the time, when it comes to wide receivers, right when you think you have enough, you probably want one more wide receiver, and then that's enough with wide receivers. More is always better. Because wide receivers tend to, when you play three of them on the field at a time, wide receivers tend to get injured for a game or two at times with soft tissue stuff. So you want quantity, right? And right now I'm pretty happy with a lot of the Browns wide receivers, right? Not just these guys. Cedric Tillman is another guy that I think's had a pretty solid camp. I think Jerry Jeudy's had a pretty solid camp as well. But Isaiah Bond, I think, has stood out. He looks like he's going to be an impact player for this team. Where he makes an impact, how they figure out a way for him to make an impact, that's going to be on the coaching staff to figure out. But I think there is a player there in Isaiah Bond that could be effective for this Cleveland Browns team. The same can be said with Casey Concepcion, and this was fairly predictable. We talked about this, right? A lot of talk about what he could and could not do in OTAs, where that's not really an environment for his game to be highlighted. And then they got the pads, and then we really started to see what Casey Concepcion brings to the table, right? Screens, end arounds, yard rack. We're really going to get to hopefully see it in the preseason. But yeah, his game has looked great. The catching stuff, it hasn't been a story all camp, 3 weeks of practice. I haven't even heard of one drop from Casey Concepcion. So really excited to see what he's doing there. And in Denzel Boston, he looks like he is what everybody hoped he'd be when the Browns drafted him. An end zone threat, a guy who could just be a big body wide receiver who can win some 50-50 balls. And look, we've all watched the practice highlights. We know that the Browns are consistently throwing 50-50 balls in practice this year, which means that we're going to see a lot of those during the season. And I'm happy to see that Denzel Boston is coming down with his fair share of those 50-50 balls. His route running has been better than expected. His ability to separate has been exactly what you hope to see for a big guy like him. Denzel Boston, there's no way around it, has been impressive for all the phases of the offseason, and training camp was no different. But really, I want to give an applause to the whole wide receiver room. But Denzel Boston, Casey Concepcion, Isaiah Bond, those are the three that stand out the most. And those might be the three young wide receivers that create your core for the Browns wide receiver room going forward. But super happy to see these guys have the success that they're having. All right, now we're going to move to number 2, which is Mason Graham. I think Mason Graham has had an excellent offseason and an excellent camp. He was in the backfield a ton the early portion of camp when he was healthy, got hurt, got back out there, continued to dominate. This is going to be a big year for Mason Graham because now this is his defense, right? He shares it with Jared Verse. He shares it with Denzel Ward. He shares it with Carson Schlesinger. But those four now collectively own this defense. This is theirs. It's not Miles's defense anymore. He's not here. It's their defense. And I think those guys are capable hands for a NFL defense to be in. And Mason Graham is the one guy who really has to show that he can get some of the stats that people look for somebody who was drafted number 5 overall, right? That's the big question for Mason Graham. It's the big question for the Browns defensive line in total, right? The entire defensive line. The critical pieces of it are filled with players who have traditionally gotten a lot of pressures, but not a lot of sacks. And there's a lot of reasons for it, right? Mason Graham, we can make the argument, sacrifice some of his sacks for Myles Garrett's sack chase. We can make the argument that Jared Verse was more focused on getting pressure than getting sacks in LA because that's what they asked him to do. But now we're going to need Jared Verse to convert pressures to sacks. We're going to need Mason Graham to convert pressures to sacks. And we're going to need that production from both of those guys. And it's been great to see that Mason Graham and Jared Verse are both having spectacular camps so far. Mason Graham is a huge part to what this team wants to do on defense for the next, I think they hope the next 10 years, right? I think they're hoping for Mason Graham to be a Cam Hayward-like presence for this team, to be a Jeffrey Simmons-like presence for this team, to be a Jalen Carter-like presence for this team. And I think that's ultimately what they're hoping to see from Mason Graham, and what we've seen so far has been in that direction. But speaking of guys who are going to help this pass rush, the other guy who's been a camp standout has been Jared Verse. Jared Verse has had as good as an offseason transition to the Cleveland Browns as you could hope, right? We all know the circumstances that brought Jared Verse here. We all know that he is filling in the shoes, technically, of the greatest defensive player of a lot of our lifetimes. But Jared Verse has handled that as well as a player can handle that. He came in here and he completely set the tone for the difference between what is Jared Verse and what is Myles Garrett. And I think that has helped him the most. The fact that he is a distinctly different vibe from Myles. Not to say that Myles was a bad vibe. I know it's easy to shit on Myles or act like Myles wasn't that good actually now that he's no longer on the team, but I thought he was the greatest defensive player of my lifetime when he was here. That opinion is not changing because he plays for the Rams, right? But what Jared Verse is a breath of fresh air for Cleveland Browns fans, which is somebody who is not ashamed to be proud to be a Cleveland Brown, who wants to help a young program get better, similar to what he did with the Los Angeles Rams, and who really is invested in building something, right? Myles was at the point of his career where he wanted to win a championship. He was over the I want to be a part of building something part of his career. And people could feel that when they would hear Myles talk about the state of the team. He was clearly not happy with that. He was Myles Garrett, so we dealt with it, and it was fine. But that was something that you could kind of feel from Myles, right? He wasn't at that point of his career where that's something he was interested in doing. Jared Verse is at the place where he is still very much interested in creating something and building something from scratch, and excited about doing that and willing to make the sacrifices in order to make that happen, which might be better for the Browns in the long term. We'll see. Trade somebody like Myles, and it's not a guarantee that it's going to work out for you, to say the least. But Jared Verse at least has the right mindset for what the Browns are looking for. The way that he's carried himself in practice, the way that he's taken on the mantle of being a leader, it's been very, very impressive from Jared Verse. The play on the field has been impressive. The juice that he puts on the field has been impressive. The vibe that he has, right? We talk about this. When the Browns traded for Jared Verse, everybody from the Los Angeles Rams who's ever been there was like, damn, I'm going to miss Jared Verse, right? He clearly has something about him that his teammates love. And you can see that here already in practice, that he is great at that, right? Keeping this locker room together, keeping these guys connected, and helping these guys play with each other. So we're seeing that happen. The play has been pretty impressive from Jared Verse. So there's also that's been impressive. He's been willing to stay late and help guys get better and do all of those extra things that we need guys to do at this point in our program. And the most important thing, this is somebody who at this point of his career has the energy to do all of the stuff that we need with this program. So really happy with Jared Verse. Not a lot of people can get traded for Myles Garrett and handle it as well as Jared Verse has. I don't know what that says for his production on the field. We'll see what that is, and we'll evaluate that once that comes. But as far as handling this portion of it, I can't imagine there are more than 3 or 4 players in the league who could have handled that better than Jared Verse. So hats off to Jared. He's done a great job handling that trade, handling his situation, and handling business. Like, Jared Verse has only been here since, June? And he already feels like he's been here for like 10 years. That's like pretty good if you're Jared Verse. Like, we're just now going to get to see Jared Verse in a Browns uniform for the first time. It don't really feel like he's new. And that speaks to the volumes in which Jared Verse has taken a leadership role with this team, because for a guy who's only been here a couple of months, it feels like he's been here for years. The next guy who's kind of related to this that I want to talk about, Spencer Fano. You know, people were a little worried about Spencer Fano at the beginning of practice. He's not with the first team. Oh, should we be worried? I said, calm down. We're okay. It's okay that Spencer's with the twos right now. Let him work up. He's going to be fine. And then we saw him getting the back and forth with Jared Verse. And then we saw him win the back and forth with Jared Verse. And now I think everybody's like, oh, okay. Cool. I think for a lot of Browns fans, a lot of people just want to make sure that this dude is not Jed Wills. And I will say this, Spencer Fano is the least Jed Wills offensive tackle that the Browns could have drafted this year, right? This guy will have nothing that reminds you of Jed Wills. His motor is much better. His activity, his personality is very different from Jed Wills, right? Jed was a little bit of a front runner, not somebody who can handle being on a bad team. Spencer Fano, you don't get that vibe from. Spencer, for as happy-go-lucky and all shucks as he is, when you talk to him in the media and when he's meeting Joe Thomas, he got a little bite to him, right? He got a little. He ain't just Mr. Happy to be there, right? He'll get in your chest. He'll talk a little cash money to you. I like it. I like to see it. I love to see stuff like that. Excited to see Spencer Fano in the preseason really get some real reps underneath his belt. People are going to try to test him because he's a rookie. They're going to talk to him crazy, all kind of stuff, because he smiles a lot. And Spencer going to do what he did to him in the Big 12, which is let him know. So love to see what Spencer Fano has put on tape here in training camp so far. The next group of guys that I am really happy with, the backup defensive backs. I have been talking about this as a whole for this team for a long time, right? I'm worried about it, especially after the Miles trade. The secondary might get exposed. I'm really worried about it. All I can say is that the backup defensive backs, right? We know that Denzel Ward is good. Tyson Campbell, from all reports, has been having a really, really strong camp and deserves to be on this list too. But the backup DBs have impressed me, because what we're not hearing is, oh my God, this secondary is a disaster. Oh my God, we should be worried about it, right? The same way we were kind of hearing of that about the slot corner position. The fact that it's not a big story, that it's not a big deal, that it's not a big thing, that tells you that these guys have been holding up pretty well behind Denzel Ward and Tyson Campbell. And that is a big, big, big piece of relief for me. The next guy and the last guy on my camp standouts list is Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. He's been making plays at the safety position, showing off his football IQ and his knack for turnovers, which is going to be really, really important this year. Like, as much as we talked about, oh, the quarterbacks are throwing a lot of interceptions, right? Every time a quarterback throws an interception in practice is a big deal, and it's only a bad thing because it's the quarterbacks that we're focused on. But these defensive backs have been getting interceptions, and so has Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, been making plays on the football. You love to see that. It looks like he is stepping up and playing really good football in camp. We hope to see that show itself during the season, obviously, but also during the preseason. But those are my guys who have been camp standouts. Let me know who your camp standouts have been. Do you think I missed somebody on this list? Make your argument in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.